Hello there. Welcome to the Couples Expert Podcast. I love doing these podcasts, particularly because it gives me a forum to really speak out and talk about some real truths. And today I'm going to have on my guest someone quite special. Robina Meehan is an emotional renovator, and we'll be talking a lot about what that means. But why this podcast is so special for me is because it really proves the power of the internet. The internet is an amazing tool, and there's a lot of negativity about the internet with people taking advantages of it, hacking, all the things that we're hearing in the news these days. But I choose to look at the internet as a source of connection. And what I mean by that is that the internet gives us an opportunity to worldwide connect with people. And today is a great example of that, because Robina is someone that was referred to me by a really good friend of mine, Jo Muirhead. Jo is a woman that's out there in Facebook talking about helping with her rehab practice, helping people really change their lives and really do something quite special. And she also has a practice about helping clinicians really market their practice. And I met Jo at a conference a number of years back, and she and I have stayed in touch in different ways. And quite a while ago, she mentioned to me that she knew someone in Australia by the name of Robina. You know, as my podcast was growing and she knew that my mission of helping couples really connect with people is such a passion of mine, that she wanted me to meet Robina, because Robina is one of the most passionate people that I know. And part of why I'm starting this podcast on this note, rather than talking about relationships and connection, is I have a goal, and I've had a goal for 2017. And that is, in my love life and in my everyday interactions with people, I want to make sure that I acknowledge more and appreciate more. And one of the things that I really want to say is the appreciation I have about my life. I am one of the most fortunate people that I know. And the reason that I say that is I not only have an incredible love with my wife, Debbie, but I get to work every single day in a job that's not a job for me. It's a love. So the loves of my life include my work and my marriage, and of course my family as well. But I wanted to make sure that I, number one, give Jo really a shout out. I wanted to make sure I really thanked her for introducing me to Robina, because the quality of the people that I have been able to meet and connect with personally is really amazing. And it has allowed me to really continue my mission of really helping couples really have and strive for a relationship in which you and your partner can look at each other and say, what a lucky man or what a lucky woman I am, because I have you in my life. And as I reflect back on my lifetime, and as a kid growing up, one of the things that I really struggled with is connecting with other people. I was a pretty lonely kid, as some of you may know, and I've talked a little bit about this. And at times I really believed that I never would be happy in my life, that I would live a lifetime of despair, a lifetime that would be filled with loneliness, feeling alone, feeling like I don't fit in. And then my world changed. And when I reflect back on this, I think about the fact that if I really held on to that belief, if I allowed myself to stay in that dark place, I never would have taken the risk that I took, which ultimately ended up with me having a woman in my life that I love so much, my wife Debbie, who has really changed not only my world, the world of my life, my kids' lives, and my family's lives. Because my world today is such a different place than it ever has been. And I really want to say it's because of a love of a woman. And that's where I am so excited to bring Robina to you. Because Robina, I want to tell you a little bit about her. She's a registered nurse, and one of the things you'll see if you go to her website, and I'm going to post her website on my show notes, what you'll find is that she talks about this, and it really puts all of this into a perspective. I want to bring it all together, which is she has an insatiable need to understand why things happen the way they do, and how to have an incredibly positive self-respect for who you are. Her forte is really connecting with the heart of a woman, and she believes very much, and I go along with this, that a woman's heart is really the channel to shift everything in a world, in our life, in a relationship, based on their perception of themselves and their own beliefs really can change the nature of what happens. And what Robina really is able to do is connect with women and recognizing that women have a wisdom and a skill to allow themselves to be who they are. And by tapping into that, she can really guide you as a facilitator, very similar to what I do with couples. She'll guide you to really having you and your partner, whether it's a man or another woman in a same-sex relationship, to really live a life of authenticity and vulnerability. And what you're going to find very quickly as you listen to this podcast, because I'm sure we're going to get here very fast, because Robina and I have had a number of conversations in preparing for this podcast. And she goes to authentic vulnerability faster than anyone I've ever met. Because what she realizes, and what I realize, and what the couples who work with me realize, is that being authentic and vulnerable is the only possible way to truly have a happy life. Because she and I connect on, both of us at times in our lives have felt really like the odd one out. And through our own personal and professional work, what we have found is by being who you are, by being true to yourself, you can have an incredible life, an incredible love, and truly know that you are an amazing person. So, Robina, I want to welcome you to the Couples Expert Podcast, and thank you for joining me.
Hello, Stuart. Thank you for having me. It's a real treat.
Yeah, as I mentioned in the introduction, it was sort of, we both were very persistent in getting together with different cancellations and the time zone differences and things like that. So it's really neat that we finally are actually doing this recording.
Absolutely, from one desert to the other and one side of the world to the other.
Right, which is what's so wonderful about the internet, is that there are people that you'll meet that you would never meet any other way.
Absolutely.
And that's true for relationships too, I think. You know, people, I think, come across each other's paths for different reasons. And I absolutely believe that you and I connected through the internet, and it was something that was destined to happen because both of us, in so many ways, are very similar and kindred spirits, I think.
Yes, isn't it? It was interesting to even discover that about each other, even just having a casual conversation. Yes, I find that fascinating too, how like attracts like.
Right. And you know, what I like to start out with people that I bring onto the show is a bit about what your path has been. I mentioned in my introduction that you're what I think is known as an emotional renovator. And yes, I wanted to spend today talking a lot about being authentic in relationships, whatever that might be, and that relationship also be relationship with yourself, and being willing to really do what it takes to be able to look yourself in the mirror and like what you see. And
Yes.
I'd like for you to sort of share a bit with the listeners a bit about how you decided that this was the path that you were going to take.
Well, the work that I did in the lead up to, I called myself an emotional renovator. I was trying to seek some sort of words that would portray somehow what it is that I offer, who I am, and what I'm here for. Just with simple words, and so emotional renovator. I thought that's kind of what happens, and it's a really practical. People know what happens when a house, for instance, is renovated. Mm-hmm. A huge change takes place, and it can be from the inside all the way to the outside. It can be a huge part of it renovated or a small part. And so emotionally, some people think that I use sledgehammers when I'm angry, I renovate a house, and that's what it means by emotional renovator. But for me, it's very much your emotional state can make such a huge shift that it renovates your whole way of being.
Do you feel like there's part of your past and your history that has led you to really come to this place at this point in your life?
Absolutely. And for me, it's not been about anything professional. It's been all about me as a person, because I feel like that's where so much authenticity sits, is just being real in every facet of your life. So for me, when I was, I'm a registered nurse by trade, but when I had children, I started to struggle after our second little boy was born, and I was behaving in ways that really did not match me, and they began to frighten me. I'd go into a rage and not recognise who was I, but for some, I was unsure of why. I'd be doing things that I was hurting my children, and that wasn't me, and it wasn't true to who I truly was, and so I was seeking something to bring me back to my truth, mm-hmm. even felt so far from it. So when I found this work, I needed to experience it for me to understand that this could be my thing. And when I went into it, in no way was I considering a new career path or a life work. I was looking for help.
Help for yourself.
My family, yes. And then it wasn't until I'd experienced the change, and for me, what felt like an emotional renovation over 5 days, it happened for me, and that I left there, and my home, my being, my children's relationship with me, and my marriage changed for the better, and they've been different ever since.
Did you just say it happened in 5 days?
5 days, yes.
Holy Toledo! That's
yes.
like talk about fast.
Yes, absolutely. And that's, I think, too, because I like variety and I like things to change, and I could see the evidence in this change just like that in an instant. So that rage that I spoke of, I wasn't even willing to call it that to start with. I was quite judgmental about my perception of rage, and crazy people do that, the mad ones. But
right.
I owned my anger. I could see that I was getting angry, and yes, okay, so I'm getting a bit too angry. But until I moved that anger out of the way, that it left room for me to recognise that was rage, and for me to own that and then move the rage. And that was one of the biggest things that shifted for me. But that was like 20 minutes from the rage, knowing that it was within me, and then for me not to feel it anymore. That was 20 minutes.
Could you define what you mean by rage? People use that word in so many different ways. And then you used a word that I want to make sure that the audience sort of really understands when you say you were hurting your children.
Yes, okay. So they kind of couple together, because for me, I've always been a very happy-go-lucky, easygoing chick, I like a good bit of fun, but I was feeling out of control of myself, and it'd take a very small trigger. Like, I'll give you an example. When this is one really defining moment for me, is when I did go into a rage, and it'll give you a good definition of what it is for me.
Okay.
I had someone coming to inspect my kitchen because I was making a homemade produce that needed the council's approval. And so I was already feeling quite judged that someone was coming to give me an okay on my own kitchen.
Right.
And I'd tidied everything up. I'd even scrubbed the oven. But all I had left to do was to vacuum the floor, and I had 2 toddlers at the time, or not even a toddler, a very tiny baby. And I thought, great, one can play, the other one can sit and watch that one playing while I get the vacuuming done. Everything will be honky-dory, no problem. Mm-hmm. And then my eldest needed my attention for some reason. I already had the vacuum cleaner going. I had a lot of head talk going on. There's a lot of chaos internally, like in my mind. Mm-hmm. And then he needed my attention, and he was probably only asking, could I open the door so he could go do a wee? But it just something snapped inside of me, and I yelled at him. I smashed the vacuum cleaner down on the floor. The head of the vacuum cleaner went flying across the room. In the realisation of that damage that I'd caused there, I reached the cord out from where it was plugged in at the wall, and the alarm clock went flying across the room, and I was in a hot state, like I was. My eldest, I don't know how he didn't wet his pants in that moment, but he just stood there, and that look in his eyes. I was the one that was meant to protect him, and here I was giving him the biggest fright of his life. And the baby that was on my hip was like, I was clinging to him so tightly right against my hip, and he was crying without even making a noise. That sort of fearful crying that, terror was in my children. That was me going into a rage. I was out of control in that moment, and I was ashamed as well. It wasn't me. There were other situations where I physically hurt my children, more than just a little smack of discipline. It was me being out of control. Mm-hmm. And that, for me, is what a rage was, when I'd be out of control and hurt them physically. And I'm sure there was other damage, emotional.
Right.
Damage happened to them too.
It sounds very much like, I think most of us who are parents can relate to a lot of what you're talking about in terms of that frustration and, smashing it and pulling it and just wanting things to go well. So I would like you to be a little bit kinder with yourself with some of that, definitely. But I understand you scare yourself because you see, I think all of us as parents, especially, we want to be the best we can be for our kids. And when we act in a way that maybe really we get in touch with our own humanness, sometimes it doesn't feel so good. And then there are those other times where we know that we're losing it and we know that we're being too harsh with our kids. And we stop and we take pause. And now we're at sort of this pinnacle road to decide. We can either go and say we deny all of it and just keep doing what we're doing, or we can stand back and go, I have to take a hard look at myself. And it sounds very much that's what you did. And you really took hold of recognizing how difficult your position was in terms of being mom, trying to give to your children, but also knowing that something was not right. Yes,
and it wasn't only my reactions to my children. It was like they were at the bottom of the line and copied everything in my reactions. There was, I might have some resentment towards their father, and I'd take it out on them. Right. A dear friendship of mine that had been long-standing was breaking down because I received a letter from a friend saying, and it was all about authenticity too. She was questioning my authenticity. Mm-hmm. And that really made me take a good hard look at myself as well. What do I stand for?
Yeah, so once all of that sort of transpired for you, how was this transition? You seem to have this passion for really helping others go through some of what you've gone through.
So I sort of started receiving that letter from my friend that I mentioned. She was saying, I dread getting mail from you because your writing is the same as mine. You copy my handwriting, you copy this, you copy that. And I thought, if someone who I feel like such a dear friend sees this is how they see me, mm-hmm. I think it struck a chord with me because she was actually speaking some truth that I wasn't really willing to own just yet. Mm-hmm. But it brought it more to the front for me. So I did a couple of, seminars, things on human behaviour. I learnt so much. I did some life coaching. I learnt so much during all of that. This thing kept happening to me, though, where it was like someone would flick a switch inside me and I'd go into these fits of rage and I knew I was causing damage to my children. That's where it was coming out. So I kept seeking. I never settled. I just refuse. Something inside me that I just won't settle. And that's like in my marriage too. If I'm not satisfied, let's mix it up a bit. I just won't settle. So I sought something else, and then I had to go to the other side of the country. My mother-in-law took some time off work, spent some time with the kids while I was still breastfeeding. So there was quite a lot of logistics that had to come into play so that I could participate in this 5-day course that I went to. Mm-hmm. And that's where every emotion that was uncomfortable for me and it didn't sit right and that I didn't think was actually serving me, I was able to work on that and changed my perception of what those emotions were so that I felt them for what they were in the moment and then was able to respond instead of reacting to something that was such a culmination of emotion that, every time I'd been angry in my life, that's the anger I was experiencing. But not only mine, my mother's when I was in utero and all those generations that had come before me, I was reacting to that perception of emotion. Whereas now that I've changed my perception to just feel things for what they are in the moment, it's brought such a sense of freedom to my own being and also my family, my husband, my children, and my relationships outside of that as well.
That's very powerful.
Extremely powerful. Oh, so you said to me that I am passionate about sharing it now. Yes, because I believe the woman is the heart of a home. In this day and age, it can sound nearly old-fashioned, but I really believe the man's the head and the woman's the heart. But without the heart beating consistently and giving that life force, the brains are lost, the head is lost. So for me, I think I must share this because there's other women that are doing that to their children. There are other women that are feeling out of control, and it's up to me to share this so that they can be the heart of their home, to beat with that strength that they know they really do have inside them.
I think the question that comes up for me, hearing you sort of define the roles the way you just did, the woman being the heart of the home and the man being the head of the home, is it almost, and I'll speak as a man here, obviously, it almost is saying the man doesn't have to be emotional.
No,
and I want you to clarify that because I know from conversations you and I have had, that is not what you're saying.
Yes, not at all. So I think innately in a woman is a need to feel safe. And that doesn't have to come from a man, but it's innate in a woman. Innate in a man is if he is in a relationship, is for him to make her happy. Mm-hmm. And if she's unhappy and she's dissatisfied, he seeks a way to bring her happiness. And if he can't find it, very often he'll withdraw. Mm-hmm. It's funny that you say that the man doesn't have to be emotional because in my own relationship, in my own marriage, I've spent a lot of time calling my husband names about his lack of emotional interaction.
Right.
But what I've come to realise is that by calling him names that allude to his lack of emotional input, it's only creating more of that within him, because why would he want to contribute to me emotionally if I just call him names when he does?
And that goes both ways, I would imagine.
Absolutely, I agree. But I think if two individuals in a marriage, say a male and a female relationship, if they're both being true to themselves and truly who they are, the dynamic of head and heart just interlinks anyway.
Right.
He can be entirely his full emotional expression of self, and she can too, but I think it naturally comes that he leads from his head and she leads from her heart.
And I think we all, as a couples counselor especially, I see this in my office a lot. Men tend to be much more the ones that go into their head, especially when stress and intellectualizing things. And I think part of what that's about is not feeling emotionally safe. And if you have a relationship in which the woman, as you're talking about it here, goes and really gets in touch with the heart that she has and is giving emotionally to her partner, to where the man and the woman both feel that they matter so much to each other that you can basically be who you are, If I go intellectual, it's really okay because then the intellectual can even bring me into the emotional state. And I can tell you intellectually how much I love you and how important you are to me, and that you are the best thing that ever happened to me, which then brings me as a man being able to talk with you on an emotional level. And that just feeds your emotion that you need. And then that heart grows into a powerful force.
Yes.
Do you like the way I sort of did that?
Yeah, it brings it all around and see how each feeds each other.
Uh-huh.
And I think that's important. So the masculine and the feminine energy can be spoken of in this context, I think. Any couple relationship needs a masculine and a feminine to match. And if there's two masculines, if there's two bulls, there's a bullfight.
Or a cat fight if it's two.
Or for me, I've spent a fair bit of time being in my masculine energy. And when I've spent a lot of time in a man's world, when my husband and I met, we were on a cattle station, and I took it upon myself to go blow for blow with him, whatever work he was doing at the time, as though that was somehow appealing to him. Mm-hmm. I wanted to somehow prove myself. But in doing that, I was only doing it for my own sake, really. But it actually took me away from the depth of what the relationship could be, because it was like I was trying to be like him, where there's no room for that. And if I rest in my feminine, which is such a more natural state for me, and it is a heart space, and even if I put my hand on my heart when I speak like this, it takes me there. I'm just so much more of who I truly am. There's no try. There's no try when a woman sits in her feminine state.
What comes up for me in terms of that is actually two questions. One is there are a number of women out there who would describe themselves much more masculine than their partners, that they enjoy those types of things. How would you see that then transpiring in how a couple then deals with, for yourself, you said you were doing it for him and it didn't really fit for you. But for some women, that fits very well. So what happens then?
The actions are you speaking of? Like that type of work?
Well, I'm actually both. Both from a work perspective, but also from an emotional sort of the head and the heart, that there are women that have described themselves very much to me, much more in their heads than their hearts.
Yeah, I think a lot of women do live in their heads more than their hearts, and I think a lot of them are longing for a different space to rest in. They do that because it's what they know and it's what keeps them safe. And it doesn't mean you can't go there and that you're not using your head.
Right.
It's more the picture of what that difference is, because and I think any woman can do any type of work she likes. I have no judgment there whatsoever. It's more a state of masculine, feminine, not a
emotional state you're talking.
Yeah, yes,
right.
Very much an emotional state, as opposed to a what you choose for your life for your life's work.
So what happens with same-sex couples? How would this all apply there?
I think the same thing still exists. I think even in same-sex couples, there's a masculine and a feminine energy. And if both are in the masculine, the same thing. They come head to head. If they're both feminine, there's dissatisfaction. Relationships wax and wane too. It's just a balancing of the yin and the yang that happens. And sometimes someone might be in their feminine, just leave space for the other one to be in the masculine. It's like a wave, and a balancing out. And it's just what brings the balance. Same-sex relationships, I think, the same thing exists.
I love that you used the yin and the yang, because as soon as you started talking about it, that sort of is the image that I had. And what's so nice about that yin-yang sort of concept is if you look at some of the symbols, how they fit together is just perfect.
Yes, and I'm using my hands are going up and down opposite to each other, like in wave motion.
Right.
It just keeps everyone balanced and brings variety as well. But see, that brings a whole nother element into it if you start talking about variety within the...
And needing to keep a relationship alive and fresh.
Yes.
How does this fit sexually?
I've done some really interesting work of late to do with this, actually. I think it's just about communication, just the same. And I think if each person is willing to communicate about what their needs are, I think it brings satisfaction and balance and joy sexually as well. And I think the same thing with variety. If it feels like things are getting a bit stagnant, this is what I was meaning when I said that brings a whole nother discussion, because variety, the need for variety, it's an emotional need of human beings. And if we get our needs met in a healthy or an unhealthy way, it's like a child throwing a tantrum. They don't mind how they get their parents' attention as long as they get it. It doesn't matter whether they have to have tanty or whether they just quietly say mummy or daddy. They're still getting their need met by getting the parents' attention. I think the same goes for us in relationships. If our needs aren't being met, we might try to go outside of the relationship to seek that need to be met, the need for variety. Whereas if we understand that all of those needs, the need, even the emotional need for variety, can be met within the context of a marriage, of a relationship,
right,
then we'll seek it out there. We'll find a way without settling, like I said before.
And what we know, particularly when we start talking about infidelity, is that it's never about sex. It's about, do I feel alone and do I feel lonely?
And do I feel connected?
And that's right. And am I enough? Am I enough?
Yeah.
Do you see me for who I am? And I know that you love me for who I am.
Yeah.
And then the other piece that comes with this in terms of when you use the example of an infant having a temper tantrum or a child having a temper tantrum, one of the things we know in terms of relationships, and I've talked a lot about cycles in relationships as an emotionally focused therapist, and one of the things that happens a lot is these really awful arguments that people see as just awful, and they think their partner doesn't like them and doesn't, respect them. What we've learned is what it really is primal panic. And it's the panic is about, I will do whatever it takes, including calling you every name in the book, to keep you close to me. Because if I do that and you fight back, I feel that at least you're present.
Yes, and I'm getting that connection. I'm getting my
That's
need
right.
And there's some certainty and control that comes with the making up again too, I think, and that brings variety as well. I'll pick a fight. Then I get when we make up, I get the connection.
Right.
I might get the sex that brings more connection. We become okay again. Right. There's so many needs being met in that context, even if it is unhealthy.
When you're talking with women about some of this and working with them, how do you really help them understand how important being authentic is? Because it's such a the concept, which is very intellectual, and we all understand what that means, but in practice, it doesn't go so easily.
So the spark of magic that plays its role in all of this is that I don't tell them anything. They begin to feel it and understand it for themselves, because their authenticity is often covered up with layers and layers of emotion that is consuming them. Not only emotion, but beliefs. Often the emotion is just a response or a reaction to the underlying beliefs they have of themselves very often. And the beliefs can be things like, I'm alone, I don't matter, I'm not enough, I'm a burden, I'm crazy, or I'm too much, And they're unconscious beliefs. So the work that I do in an emotional reno blends the conscious and the unconscious brain. So wisdom is received from the unconscious brain and brought into the conscious awareness. So these girls are doing it all for themselves. So when as time goes on, they just start recognizing who they truly are, and they feel that, and there's no going back. When you live that from deep down in your core, there's no option but to live their own truth. So that's what I think is one of the most exciting things for me, is that every individual's authenticity is exactly that. It's theirs, and it's their realness and their rawness, and it's exciting seeing them discover that for themselves for the first time too. And sometimes it's not the first time. Sometimes they remember, this is like when I was a little girl. This is how I used to be. And they're giving themselves the freedom to feel it and be her again.
So how would you help? I know you don't tell them what to do, but how, for those that are out there listening that are really relating, and I think there's a lot of people out there that are relating to what you're saying, how do we guide them to try to get in touch with their true selves?
Well, I think a really important starting point is to just listen, because if somebody is relating to what I'm saying, they're already hearing, they're already being. It's nearly like someone's tapping them on the shoulder, or when a child grabs your leg and they persist, and you just kind of flick them off.
Right.
The same sort of thing happens with your still small voice. There's something inquiring of you to listen. There's something asking you to be more and to be more of who you truly are. And if you keep covering that with, the angry outbursts or the busyness or the consumption with social media, you're never going to hear it. So I think a really good way is to just stop and listen. So that might be creating an opportunity for yourself to walk for 7 minutes every morning, It could be to sit and write. Journaling is such an incredible tool to use, but it's also such a hated thing.
Right. Most people will scream about having to do that. That's for sure.
But I think we have a perception of what journaling is meant to be, when really it can be you stabbing a page with a pencil. You might snap the pencil, but it's basically getting some of the garbage out of your body. That's the role that it plays, and then it leaves room for you to hear and to listen and to feel what's really there. Never do I advocate writing for the sake of rereading it and going back to delve on the rubbish. You can write something down as fast as you possibly can and throw it in the rubbish bin or burn it. Right. It doesn't matter. The point is getting it out of your body. That's one way to start listening and to start being who you truly are. Another way...
Can I interrupt you just one quick second? Because I want to add something to what you just said, which I think is so important, because Absolutely. It fits with what you're just saying, which is writing without judgment.
Without judgment, which can be so challenging.
Yes, to allow whatever flows to flow and not be afraid of what you're putting down.
Yes.
And don't judge yourself for feeling whatever it is, because if this is about discovery, we want to discover whatever's there.
And also to accept and validate your emotion too. I think this is one way that keeps people where they are, is that they've spent their lifetime containing these emotions and keeping them within themselves, and that's what's brought them to the point now that they're about to pop like a big old boil, They're nearly uncontainable. It's because they've tried to keep it inside. For me, the reason I wouldn't consciously acknowledge that I was feeling rage was because I didn't have a clue where that would go if I let myself feel it. I was too afraid of what I might actually do.
Right.
So to validate, and I also thought, what's wrong with me? I've got the perfect life. I've got the white picket fence. I live a comfortable life. What is wrong with me? Who do I think I am to say that I'm not feeling okay? I've got the perfect life, and that is such a common story. People won't even acknowledge what they're feeling because they think other people are so much worse off than them.
Right.
I've never had this happen. I wasn't raped like she was. I don't live in a domestic violence relationship.
Right.
It's okay to feel. Whatever it is you're feeling, it's okay to feel, because then you can move past it.
I mean, that is such a battle for me when I have people coming in who said they're here and they're not even sure they should be here because all they're feeling is totally disconnected and they're not being beaten up. I've got all this money, or, financially I'm good. My kids are doing well, but I feel so alone. I should just suck it up and just forget about it. And I say, wait a minute, you just described horror. In my mind, that disconnect is so huge.
Yes.
Now I know I cut you off when you were talking about the journaling, and I hope you can remember where you were going with that.
Yes, I was going to say obligation is a huge way that stops us from being our true selves. We might feel obligated to our families. We might feel obligated to our extended families in the roles we play within communities we're a part of, churches, school groups, social environments. We respond and live out of obligation, and that is a surefire way to never be your truth, never be your authentic self. Whereas if you drop the obligation and you respond, you sometimes say no and listen, what do I really need? You know what, I really just need to stay home tonight, go to bed early and cuddle my children. Or I really need to be away from my children tonight. I'm going to arrange something so that they can be safe and happy as well. And I'm going to give myself an hour to sit in the car and look at a view. You know, it can be something, the most simplistic thing, but if you stop with the obligation, and sometimes that has such a hold on us.
Oh boy, can I relate to this? I mean, one of the things that I've done today is sort of an interesting day when we're doing this recording, because I've just hit a pinnacle of, I've done 100 podcasts. Mm-hmm. This is probably 103, 104 by the time they all get released. And so I made a decision today, earlier in the week, that I was going to take today off and do nothing. I was going to sit at home, watch movies, read the paper, exercise, just really be good to me, and not go on social media and not do any work. And any conversation that I have other than this one, because I knew we had this scheduled, I wasn't going to do anything that's related to my practice at all. I can't tell you how hard this has been.
Yes, I can relate
to shut my brain off. And I have a wonderful assistant by the name of Lisa, who today, a couple of times today, has said, you may not do this. You may not respond to this because we've got everything covered for you. And she does. But the whole concept of really just letting go is so darn hard.
So darn hard. And so this relates back to our beliefs as well, because you might have a belief about what it means to work hard and what it means of you as a...
No, I'm lazy if I'm not working. Everything's going to fall apart. Nothing will do well if I don't have control over this. How could it happen? And it's such a nonsense. But look at what we do to ourselves.
Absolutely. And, we're in the business of giving and helping others. It's a huge part of who we really are.
Right.
When we do that, we're giving of ourselves. Our energy sources are being depleted when we are giving of ourselves. So we need to remember that we need to top them up. And it nearly becomes cliche until you really realise the impact. At the end of last year, I called it burnout. I realised one day, it just occurred to me, okay, I admit it.
Yes,
I'm burnt out.
That's right.
But I love what I do. I really love what I do. And it's felt like it snuck up on me. But I hadn't been honouring any of my own boundaries around myself.
Right. I can tell my clients what to do.
Yes. But they'll take so much more notice of you if you're doing it for yourself.
Oh, I know. And now we can really bring into, both from a professional standpoint and for professionals, what true authenticity is.
Yes.
How could I be a hypocrite?
Yeah.
And that's what I realized, which is part of why I've done this, is because I tell my clients all the time, you got to take care of yourself. But I don't. If I'm constantly, and I can tell you, my defense would be to tell everyone, if anyone asks, including my friend Lisa there, when she made a comment, I said, but I love this. This is fun. I'm not working. And we lie to ourselves. And we realize that how much better we are when we really are true to ourselves, and our bodies need the rest. We need...
It's just as much a need as anything else.
Right. It's not a want. I want the rest. No. I need the rest.
Yeah.
It's so interesting how the human mind can really just twist things to be unhealthy.
And really simple, seemingly healthy things actually are unhealthy. What I realised a few years ago now, because I was really enjoying my work, it was flowing. I was getting clients. I was getting great results. As lives were changing, that was the purpose of why I was doing it. And then it occurred to me one day, like, I'm not working hard enough. This is not, something not right. And then when I looked into what did I believe about it, in my family, the men work really hard physically, and most of the men in my family of origin have bad backs.
Mm-hmm.
So my belief was that to work hard and provide well for your family, you must be in physical pain.
Oh, interesting.
So it wasn't a conscious thing, but when I prodded around to try and discover it, that's when I realised, wow, that's not really working for me, is it? Because why do I have to be in physical pain to do the work that I do? I don't. So when sometimes just the realisation of what you've been believing and that's how that's been playing out in your life, sometimes that's just enough and you can replace it with something else.
And as men, I can speak for this a bit. The concept of no pain, no gain is a very interesting thing in how it traps men in relationships and in so many different things in our lives that we don't have to be in pain. We can be. And
there's so many little cliches like that. No pain, no gain. Life wasn't meant to be easy.
That's right.
We say that flippantly, but what if that is what we really believe?
I don't think they're just saying, I think very much it's not just a saying. I think we all, if we don't stand back, you talk about the conscious and unconscious brain. This is where it's so critical. I think it is so unconscious. Half the time we don't even realize we're doing it until we slow down enough. And that's where your comment about 7-minute meditation and, walking meditations and taking deep breaths and really slowing down and taking a day off here and there is so important because we begin to really see our irrational thinking.
Yes.
And what we believe deep down is automatic. It's so automatic that we don't even question it.
Yeah. That's why I say that's where the magic is in what happens in a Renault, because you're getting new things happening at an unconscious level. So it's not, I am happy, I am glad today. You're not telling yourself, oh, no, that's right, I'm happy today. You just are. And so it means you're more able to just be in your life and do your life without meddling with it.
I want you to define something because you've used a term a couple of times and I just realized that we've never really explained what it is. And you just said it now. I may mispronounce it, but did you say in Renault?
An emotional Renault.
Could you explain exactly what that means and how that works before we stop today?
Yeah, so when a woman comes to me feeling emotionally tumultuous, and she says, what is it that you do? And I will explain to her she could experience an emotional renovation. So that is, she spends some time with me and we take her emotional state as it currently is and we get an understanding of what that is, and then we get an understanding of where she wants it to be. And we use the brain process that I speak of that blends the conscious and the unconscious mind, and we work specifically on each one of those emotions, and we get her from the state she's in to the state she wants to be in, and that's where she can do her new way of life from that place, which is such a place of authenticity for her.
And a lack of dissonance.
Yes.
Because I think the dissonance and where the two parts just collide and don't work well together is such a debilitating experience for most people.
Yes, agreed. Absolutely.
So if those listening are wanting to get hold of you to really explore this more, how would they do that?
They can find me on Facebook, Robina Meehan Emotional Renovator, or my website is robinameehan.com.
And I will have that in the show notes as well for everyone. So if you're driving, you don't have to, please don't hit the car in front of you. Please don't hit the car in front of you to write this down. I want to just thank you so much for giving of yourself, your time, and just, being willing to sort of share this both personal and your work life, because you really are someone that has put the two into a nice package for yourself where you feel so uplifting, not only with your own sense of discovery, but helping women and men and couples really discover who they truly are.
Thanks so much for having me, Stuart, and persisting so that we could create a time to make this happen, because it's true, I am passionate about it, and I'll share it as much as I can.
All right. And thank you all for joining us again. And we'll see you next time. And please stay connected. Bye-bye.